Lewis Hamilton thought he knew who his enemies were. On the racetrack, they wore different colored helmets and drove for rival teams. But the people who smiled at him every day, who celebrated his victories, who he trusted with his life at 200 mph, they were planning something far worse than just beating him in a race. They were planning to destroy him completely. For 3 years, his own Mercedes team had been working with his biggest rivals. His race engineer was selling his secrets. His team boss was avoiding his eyes. Even his father was keeping deadly secrets that would shatter everything Lewis believed about himself. But the worst betrayal of all? It came from someone Lewis had forgotten about completely. Someone whose heart he had broken 10 years ago, and who had spent every day since then planning the perfect revenge. The woman who now controlled his entire career. The woman who held his future in her hands. The woman who was about to make him pay for choosing racing over love. Lewis Hamilton was about to discover that in Formula One, your biggest enemy isn't the driver trying to overtake you. It's the person standing in your own garage, wearing your team's colors, whispering poison in your ear while smiling to your face. And when Lewis finally learned the truth, it would destroy everything he thought he knew about racing, about family, and about himself. Lewis Hamilton sat alone in his hotel room at the Hotel Hermitage in Monaco. The golden trophy from today's Monaco Grand Prix sat on the marble table next to him, but he barely looked at it. Outside his window, the Mediterranean Sea sparkled in the evening sun. The streets below were still busy with racing fans celebrating his victory. He should have been happy. He had just won one of the most important races in Formula One. The crowd had cheered his name. His team had lifted him on their shoulders. Cameras had flashed as he sprayed champagne on the podium. But something felt wrong deep in his stomach. Lewis picked up the trophy and held it in his hands. It was heavy and cold. He had won many trophies like this one, but today felt different. During the race, strange things had happened. His race. Engineer Marcus Chen had sounded nervous on the radio. His team boss, Sophia Reeves, had avoided looking at him after the race. Even his mechanics seemed uncomfortable when they congratulated him. "Maybe I'm just tired," Lewis said to himself. He had been racing for many years. Sometimes the pressure got to him. Sometimes he imagined problems that weren't really there. His phone buzzed on the bed. Lewis picked it up and saw a text message from a number he didn't know. The message made his heart beat faster. "They're not telling you everything. Meet me at Café de Paris tomorrow at 3 p.m. Come alone." A friend. Lewis stared at the message. Who was texting him? What weren't they telling him? He thought about deleting the message and forgetting about it, but something made him keep reading it over and over. He walked to the window and looked down at the busy street. Monaco was a small place. Everyone knew everyone here. Racing drivers, team owners, and rich people all lived close together. Secrets were hard to keep in Monaco, but Lewis felt like everyone was keeping secrets from him. His phone rang. It was his father, Anthony Hamilton. "Lewis, I watched the race on TV. You were amazing out there," Anthony said. His voice sounded happy, but Lewis heard something else, too. Was his father nervous? "Thanks, Dad." "It was a good race," Lewis replied. He wanted to tell his father about the strange message, but something stopped him. "Are you okay, son?" "You sound tired," Anthony asked. "I'm fine. Just thinking about things," Lewis said. He wasn't sure if that was true. "Well, get some rest. You have a big season ahead of you," Anthony said. Then he hung up quickly, like he was in a hurry. Lewis put his phone down and sat on his bed. Even his father had sounded strange, like he was hiding something too. Lewis tried to watch TV, but he couldn't focus. He tried to read a book, but the words blurred together. He kept thinking about the message. Who was this friend who wanted to meet him? What did they know that he didn't? He thought about his team at Mercedes. Marcus Chen had been his race engineer for 2 years. Marcus helped Lewis make important decisions during races. He told Lewis when to speed up, when to slow down, and when to change his tires. Lewis trusted Marcus with his life every time he got in the race car. But today, Marcus had made some strange choices. In the middle of the race, Marcus had told Lewis to slow down when he didn't need to. Later, Marcus had waited too long to tell Lewis about other cars behind him. These mistakes could have cost Lewis the race. Luckily, Lewis was fast enough to win anyway. Sophia Reeves was the team principal at Mercedes. She was Lewis's boss and made the big decisions about race strategy. Sophia had always been friendly to Lewis. She smiled at him, shook his hand after races, and told reporters how much she valued him as a driver. But lately, Sophia had been acting different. She avoided talking to Lewis alone. When Lewis asked questions about the car or race plans, Sophia gave short answers and changed the subject. After today's race, Sophia had congratulated Lewis quickly, and then walked away without looking at him. Lewis got up and walked around his hotel room. The room was fancy, with expensive furniture and a beautiful view. Mercedes paid for everything, because Lewis was their star driver. But now, Lewis wondered if Mercedes was really on his side. He picked up his phone and read the message again. "They're not telling you everything." What could that mean? Was his team hiding something from him? Were they making decisions about his career without telling him? Lewis thought about other strange things that had happened recently. Last month, he had seen Marcus Chen talking quietly with engineers from Red Bull Racing, Mercedes' biggest rival. When Lewis asked Marcus about it, Marcus said they were just being friendly. But why would Mercedes engineers be friendly with their enemies? 2 weeks ago, Lewis had overheard Sophia Reeves on a phone call. She was saying something about the plan and 2021 season. When she saw Lewis listening, she quickly ended the "eat au toim" call and walked away. Lewis had also noticed that some team meetings happened without him. Other drivers usually attended all the important meetings with their teams. But lately, Mercedes had been having meetings that Lewis wasn't invited to. When he asked why, they said the meetings were just about boring technical stuff. The sun was setting over Monaco now. The sky turned orange and pink over the water. Lewis had always loved this view, but tonight it made him feel lonely. He felt like he was surrounded by people who were lying to him. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from his teammate George Russell. "Great race today, mate. See you at the factory tomorrow." Lewis typed back, "Thanks. See you there." But he wondered if George knew about the secrets too. George was younger and newer to the team. Maybe Mercedes told George things they didn't tell Lewis. Or maybe George was part of whatever was happening. Lewis walked to his suitcase and pulled out a notebook. He wrote down all the strange things he had noticed lately. Marcus's nervous behavior, Sophia's avoiding him, the secret meetings, the phone calls that stopped when he came near. When he finished writing, Lewis looked at the list. It was longer than he expected. Too many strange things had happened for it to be a coincidence. Something was definitely wrong. He looked at the mysterious text message one more time. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. at Café de Paris. Should he go? It could be dangerous. It could be someone trying to trick him. But it could also be someone trying to help him learn the truth. Lewis made his decision. He would go to the meeting. He needed to know what secrets his team was keeping from him. He needed to know if the people he trusted were really his friends. As he got ready for bed, Lewis felt scared, but also determined. Tomorrow, he would finally start looking for answers. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew his life was about to change forever. The Monaco Grand Prix trophy sat on his table, shining in the lamplight. Lewis had won the race, but he felt like he was losing something much more important. He was losing trust in the people closest to him. Outside his window, Monaco slept peacefully, but Lewis Hamilton lay awake, wondering who he could really trust in a world full of secrets and lies. Lewis woke up at 6 a.m. with dark circles under his eyes. He had barely slept all night. Every time he closed his eyes, he thought about the mysterious message. His mind kept asking the same questions over and over. Who wanted to meet him? What secrets were they talking about? He ordered room service, but couldn't eat much. The coffee tasted bitter. The croissants felt like cardboard in his mouth. Lewis kept checking his phone, reading the message again and again. They're not telling you everything. At 9 a.m., Lewis went to the Mercedes factory for his usual team meeting. The building was modern and clean, with silver Mercedes logos everywhere. This place had been like a second home to him for years. But today, it felt different. Today, it felt like enemy territory. Marcus Chen was already in the meeting room when Lewis arrived. Marcus looked tired too, with red eyes and messy hair. When he saw Lewis, Marcus quickly closed his laptop and smiled. "Good morning, Lewis. Ready for another great week?" Marcus said. His voice sounded too cheerful, like he was trying too hard to seem normal. "Morning, Marcus," Lewis replied. He watched Marcus carefully. Was Marcus hiding something behind that fake smile? Sophia Reeves walked into the room carrying a stack of papers. She nodded at Lewis but didn't make eye contact. "Let's talk about next week's race in Spain," she said quickly. For the next hour, they discussed race strategy and car setup, but Lewis noticed that Marcus and Sophia kept looking at each other when they thought he wasn't watching. They seemed to be having a silent conversation with their eyes. When the meeting ended, Lewis walked slowly to his car. He felt like everyone was watching him. The mechanics, the engineers, even the security guards, they all seemed to know something he didn't. Lewis drove around Monaco for 2 hours before going to Café de Paris. He needed time to think. He drove past the harbor where expensive yachts floated in the blue water. He drove through the tunnel where he had raced yesterday. Everything looked the same as always, but Lewis felt like he was seeing it through different eyes. At 2:45 p.m., Lewis parked near Café de Paris. The café was busy with tourists and local people drinking coffee and eating lunch. Lewis put on sunglasses and a baseball cap to hide his face. He didn't want anyone to recognize him. He found a table in the corner where he could see the whole café. Lewis ordered a coffee and waited. His hands were shaking a little. He felt nervous and excited at the same time. At exactly 3 p.m., a woman walked into the café. She was about 40 years old with short black hair and dark sunglasses. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a small handbag. She looked around the café carefully, then walked straight to Lewis's table. "Lewis Hamilton?" she asked quietly. Lewis nodded. "Are you the person who sent me the message?" The woman sat down across from him. "My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I used to work for Mercedes until 6 months ago." Lewis felt his heart beat faster. "Why did you want to meet me?" Elena looked around the café to make sure no one was listening. Then she leaned forward and spoke in a whisper. "Lewis, what I'm about to tell you will break your heart," she said. "Your own team has been working against you for 2 years." Lewis felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. That's impossible. Mercedes is my team. They support me. Elena shook her head sadly. I wish that were true, but I have proof that they've been betraying you. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small USB drive. She placed it on the table between them. Everything is on here, Elena said. Emails, documents, recorded phone calls. Evidence that Mercedes has been planning to destroy your career. Lewis stared at the USB drive. It was small and silver, but Elena was saying it contained the most important information of his life. Why are you telling me this? Lewis asked. Because it's not right, Elena replied. I worked for Mercedes for 8 years. I helped design race cars and plan strategies. But when I found out what they were really doing to you, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Elena told Lewis that she had been fired from Mercedes for asking too many questions. She had noticed strange decisions being made about Lewis's car and race strategies. When she tried to understand why, her bosses told her to mind her own business. I started investigating on my own, Elena explained. I copied files and recorded conversations. What I found was worse than I imagined. Lewis picked up the USB drive. It felt heavy in his hand, like it was full of terrible secrets. What kind of betrayal are you talking about? Lewis asked. Elena looked around the cafe again. They made a deal with Red Bull Racing. Mercedes has been sharing information about your car setup and race strategies with their biggest competitor. Lewis felt sick. Red Bull was the team that beat him the most often. Max Verstappen, Red Bull's star driver, had been winning races that Lewis should have won. Now Elena was saying that Mercedes had been helping Max beat him. That's not all, Elena continued. Mercedes has been deliberately giving you worse equipment than your teammate George Russell. Your car has older parts and less powerful engine settings. Lewis thought about all the times this season when George had performed better than him. The team always said it was because George was adapting better to the new car. But Elena was saying the team was sabotaging Lewis's car on purpose. Why would they do this to me? Lewis asked. His voice sounded weak and confused. Money, Elena said simply. Red Bull paid Mercedes $50 million to help Max Verstappen win the championship. Mercedes executives decided that your success was less important than their bank accounts. Lewis felt angry and heartbroken at the same time. The people he trusted most in the world had sold him out for money. They had smiled at his face while stabbing him in the back. Elena reached across the table and touched Lewis's hand. I'm sorry. Lewis, I know this is hard to hear, but you need to see the evidence for yourself. She pulled out her phone and showed Lewis a photo. It was Marcus Chen sitting at a restaurant table with Christian Horner, the team principal of Red Bull Racing. They were shaking hands and smiling. This photo was taken 3 weeks ago, Elena said. Marcus has been meeting with Red Bull regularly, giving them information about your race preparations. Lewis stared at the photo. Marcus, the man who guided him through every race, the man Lewis trusted with his life, was working for the enemy. Elena showed Lewis more photos on her phone. Sophia Reeves meeting with Red Bull engineers, Mercedes executives having dinner with Red Bull sponsors, even some Mercedes mechanics wearing Red Bull shirts when they thought no one was looking. How long has this been going on? Lewis asked. 2 years, Elena replied. It started in 2020, right after you won your 7th championship. Mercedes decided they had gotten everything they needed from you. Now they want to build up other drivers and make more money from deals with competitors. Lewis felt like his whole world was falling apart. Everything he believed about his team, his career, and his success was based on lies. Elena put her phone away and looked at Lewis with sad eyes. There's more, Lewis. Much more. but you need to see the files on that USB drive first. Go home, plug it into your computer, and read everything. Then call me tomorrow." She wrote her phone number on a napkin and slid it across the table. "Be careful who you trust," Elena warned. "This conspiracy goes deeper than just your racing team. Some of the people closest to you are involved." Elena stood up to leave, then turned back to Lewis one more time. "Lewis, there's something else you need to know. The Abu Dhabi race last year, when you lost the championship to Max Verstappen, that wasn't bad luck or poor strategy. It was planned." Lewis felt like the world was spinning around him. The most painful loss of his career, the championship that was stolen from him in the final laps, had been planned by his own team. Elena walked away, leaving Lewis alone at the table with the USB drive and 1,000 questions. He sat there for a long time, watching people walk by on the street. Everyone looked normal and happy. They had no idea that Lewis Hamilton's world had just been destroyed by the truth. Finally, Lewis put the USB drive in his pocket and walked back to his car. He had evidence of the biggest betrayal in Formula One history sitting in his pocket. Tonight, he would learn just how deep the conspiracy went. As he drove back to his hotel, Lewis realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The USB drive contained more than just evidence. It contained the end of everything he thought he knew about his life. Lewis parked his car at the Hotel Hermitage and sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes. His hands were still shaking from everything Elena had told him. The USB drive felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket. He was scared to see what was on it, but he knew he had to look. He walked through the hotel lobby trying to act normal. The desk clerk smiled and waved at him. 2 tourists asked for selfies. Lewis forced himself to smile and be polite, but inside his stomach was twisted in knots. Back in his room, Lewis locked the door and pulled all the curtains closed. He got his laptop from his suitcase and sat on the bed. His hands were shaking as he plugged in the USB drive. The drive opened and showed dozens of folders with strange names like Project Sunset and Hamilton Exit Strategy. Lewis felt sick just reading the folder names. His own team had been planning his exit for years. He opened the first folder and found emails between Mercedes executives. The first email was from Marcus Webber, the Mercedes CEO, to Christian Horner at Red Bull Racing. The date was January 15, 2020. "Christian, as we discussed during our private meeting, we need Lewis to win his 7th championship this year to match Michael Schumacher's record. This will maximize his commercial value and create the perfect story for his career finale. After 2020, we can proceed with the transition plan we outlined." Lewis read the email 3 times before it sank in. Mercedes had planned his career like a movie script. They wanted him to get 7 championships to match the great Michael Schumacher. Then they planned to get rid of him. The next email was even worse. It was from Christian Horner back to Marcus Weber. "Marcus, Red Bull agrees to the terms. We will ensure Max Verstappen becomes champion in 2021, creating a new rivalry storyline that will benefit both our teams. The $50 million payment will be transferred after Max's first championship win." Lewis felt like he couldn't breathe. His 2 biggest rivals in Formula One had been working together against him. They had planned Max's championship victory before the 2021 season even started. He opened more emails and found messages between Marcus Chen and Red Bull engineers. His own race engineer, the man who talked to him during every race, had been sharing Mercedes' secrets with the enemy. One email from Marcus Chen to a Red Bull engineer made Lewis feel physically sick. "Lewis still doesn't suspect anything. He trusts me completely. I've been giving you his driving data and setup preferences as requested. The psychological profile you asked for is attached. It shows exactly how to pressure him during races to make mistakes. Lewis slammed his laptop, shut, and ran to the bathroom. He thought he was going to throw up. The man he trusted to guide him through dangerous races at 200 mm had been studying his weaknesses and sharing them with competitors. After splashing cold water on his face, Lewis opened his laptop again. He had to see everything, no matter how much it hurt. The next folder contained financial records showing payments from Red Bull to Mercedes executives. $50 million had been split between 5 Mercedes managers, including Marcus Chen and Sophia Reeves. Lewis's closest team members had each received $10 million to betray him. Lewis found voice recordings in another folder. He clicked on the first one and heard Marcus Chen's voice talking to someone on the phone. Lewis doesn't suspect anything. He thinks I'm his friend and want him to win. This will be the perfect betrayal. When he finds out the truth, it will destroy him completely. The voice on the other end was Christian Horner. Good. Make sure he suffers. Lewis Hamilton has been winning for too long. It's time for him to learn what losing feels like. Lewis turned off the recording and sat in silence. These people weren't just betraying him for money. They wanted him to suffer. They wanted to hurt him emotionally. His phone rang. It was his brother, Nicholas. "Hey, Lewis, how are you feeling after yesterday's win?" Nicholas asked cheerfully. Lewis wanted to tell Nicholas everything, but something stopped him. If Mercedes could buy his race engineer and team principal, who else might be involved? Could he trust anyone? "I'm okay," Lewis said. "Just tired." "You sound upset. Is everything all right?" Nicholas asked. "Yeah, just thinking about some things. I need to go for a drive and clear my head," Lewis replied. After hanging up, Lewis realized he couldn't talk to anyone about this yet. He didn't know how deep the conspiracy went. He didn't know who else might be involved. Lewis put on his jacket and left the hotel. He needed to move, to think, to process what he had learned. He got in his car and drove through the winding roads of Monaco, past the harbor where million-dollar yachts sat in the evening light. As he drove, Lewis thought about every race where things had gone wrong. The 2021 Turkish Grand Prix, where Marcus had told him to change his engine, giving him a penalty that cost him valuable points. At the time, Lewis thought it was a necessary technical decision. Now he wondered if it was sabotage. He remembered the 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix, where Mercedes had made a strange strategy call that almost cost him the race. Sophia Reeves had apologized afterward, saying it was a mistake. But was it really a mistake? Or was it part of the plan to make him lose? "Points?" Lewis pulled over at a scenic overlook and called Elena's number. "Elena, it's Lewis. I've seen some of the files. I need to know more." "I was hoping you would call," Elena said. "Can you meet me again?" "There's much more to show you." They agreed to meet at a small restaurant called La Petite Maison, away from the busy tourist areas. Lewis drove there feeling like he was in a spy movie. He kept checking his mirrors to see if anyone was following him. Elena was already waiting at a corner table when Lewis arrived. She looked scared and kept glancing toward the door. "Lewis, I've been getting strange phone calls since yesterday," she said quietly. "I think they know we talked." Lewis sat down across from her. "Elena, I saw the emails and recordings. I can't believe Marcus and Sophia would do this to me." Elena looked sad. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but there's more you need to know about Project Sunset." She pulled out a folder of papers. "The plan wasn't just about money, Lewis. It was about control. Mercedes wanted to control your entire career from start to finish." Elena showed Lewis documents proving that Mercedes had been planning his retirement since 2020. They had already chosen his replacement and planned his farewell tour. Your contract negotiations for 2021 were fake, Elena explained. Mercedes had already decided you would only race for 2 more years. They just needed you to believe you were fighting for your future. Lewis felt betrayed on every level. Even his contract talks, where he thought he was securing his future, had been lies. What about Toto Wolff? Lewis asked about his team principal. Was he part of this too? Elena looked uncomfortable. Toto knew about some of it. At first, he fought against the plan. He wanted to protect you. But Mercedes executives threatened to fire him if he didn't cooperate. Lewis realized that even the people who wanted to help him had been forced to betray him. Toto Wolff, who had been like a father figure to Lewis, had been caught between loyalty and survival. So Toto was protecting his own job by sacrificing mine? Lewis asked. It's more complicated than that, Elena said. Toto tried to find ways to help you without getting fired, but Mercedes executives were too powerful. Lewis felt sorry for Toto, but also angry. Everyone had chosen their own interests over doing the right thing. Elena checked her phone, and her face went pale. Lewis, I just got a text message. They know where we are. She showed Lewis the message. Stop talking, or face the consequences. Lewis looked around the restaurant. Everything seemed normal, but Elena was clearly scared. There's something else you need to know about the Abu Dhabi race, Elena said quickly. The safety car situation wasn't just bad luck. It was planned. Lewis felt his world spinning again. Abu Dhabi 2021 was the most painful loss of his career. He had been leading the race and about to win his 8th championship when a safety car changed everything in the final laps. Mercedes secretly worked with the race officials to create the perfect situation for Max to win, Elena explained. They timed the safety car perfectly and made sure the rules would be bent to help Max. Lewis remembered that terrible day. How? The safety car had come out at exactly the worst moment for him. How the race officials had made unusual decisions that helped Max Verstappen. He had thought it was just bad luck and poor officiating. Elena's phone buzzed with another text message. This time her face went completely white. Lewis, we have to leave. Now, she said, standing up quickly. What's wrong? Lewis asked. Elena showed him the new message. We know about your father. Lewis felt his blood turn cold. What about my father? Elena grabbed his arm. Lewis, there's something else you need to know about your family. Your father, Anthony, isn't just an innocent victim in this. He's been part of the conspiracy from the beginning. Lewis felt like someone had hit him with a hammer. That's impossible, he said, his voice barely a whisper. My father would never betray me. He sacrificed everything for my career. Elena looked around the restaurant nervously. We need to get out of here first. Then I'll show you the proof. They quickly paid for their drinks and hurried outside. Elena led Lewis to her small blue car parked around the corner. As they got in, Lewis saw a black Mercedes sedan pull up near the restaurant. 2 men in dark suits got out and walked toward where they had been sitting. Drive, Lewis said urgently. Elena started the car and drove quickly through the narrow streets of Monaco. Lewis kept looking back to see if the black car was following them. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Where are we going? Lewis asked. My apartment. It's the only safe place I know, Elena replied, turning down a small street away from the main tourist areas. They drove in silence for 10 minutes. Lewis's mind was spinning with questions about his father. Anthony Hamilton had worked 3 jobs when Lewis was young to pay for karting lessons and racing equipment. He had driven Lewis to races all over Europe in an old van. He had been Lewis's biggest supporter and closest friend. Elena parked outside, a small apartment building. "This way," she said, leading Louis up 2 flights of stairs to a tiny apartment. The apartment was simple but clean, with a small kitchen, a living room, and papers scattered everywhere. Elena had been working from here since leaving Mercedes, trying to gather evidence of the conspiracy. "Sit down," Elena said, pointing to a couch. "What I'm about to show you will be the hardest thing you've ever seen." She opened her laptop and pulled up a video file. "This was recorded 6 months ago at a Mercedes executive meeting. Your father was there." Elena clicked play. Louis saw a conference room with several Mercedes executives sitting around a table. At the far end of the table sat Anthony Hamilton, Louis's father. Louis couldn't believe his eyes. "Why was my dad at a Mercedes meeting?" "Just watch," Elena said sadly. On the video, Marcus Weber, the Mercedes CEO, was speaking. "Anthony, we appreciate your cooperation over the past 2 years. The plan is working perfectly." Anthony Hamilton nodded. "I just want what's best for Louis. You promised. This would help his career in the long run." Weber smiled coldly. "It will. Louis will retire as a 7-time world champion, matching Michael Schumacher's record. He'll be remembered as one of the greatest drivers ever." "Isn't that what you want for your son?" Anthony looked uncomfortable. "But lying to him feels wrong." "Louis trusts me completely." "Sometimes fathers have to make difficult decisions," Weber replied. "You're protecting Louis from information that would hurt him. When this is all over, he'll thank you." Louis watched his father sign a document on the video. Weber slid an envelope across the table to Anthony. $2 million, as agreed, Weber said. "The final payment will come after Louis announces his retirement." Louis felt sick watching his father take the money. The man who had taught him about honesty and hard work was being paid to lie to him. Elena paused the video. "I'm sorry, Louis. I know this is devastating." Louis couldn't speak. He stared at the frozen image of his father on the laptop screen. Everything he believed about his family was crumbling. "How long has this been going on?" Louis finally asked. Elena opened another file. "Mercedes first approached your father in January 2020, right after you won your 6th championship. They told him they had a plan to secure your legacy and make sure you retired at the perfect time." She showed Louis documents proving that Mercedes had been paying Anthony Hamilton for over 2 years. Not just money, but also expensive gifts, paid vacations, and promises about Louis's future. "They convinced your father that this was the best way to protect your career," Elena explained. "They said if Louis knew the truth, it would destroy his motivation, and he might make dangerous mistakes on the track." Louis thought about all the times his father had acted strangely over the past 2 years. The secret phone calls, the nervous behavior after races, the way Anthony changed the subject when Louis mentioned problems with his team. "What exactly did they ask him to do?" Louis asked. Elena pulled up more documents. "They wanted your father to keep you calm and trusting. Whenever you got suspicious about team decisions, Anthony was supposed to convince you everything was normal." Louis remembered several conversations where his father had done exactly that. When Louis complained about strange strategy calls, Anthony always said the team knew best. When Louis worried about his car's performance, Anthony told him to trust his engineers. "My dad was basically working as a spy for Mercedes," Louis said bitterly. "It's more complicated than that," Elena said gently. "Your father genuinely thought he was protecting you. Mercedes convinced him that you were too emotional to handle the truth about their business decisions." Elena showed Louis a recorded phone call between Anthony and Marcus Weber from 3 months ago. On the recording, Anthony sounded worried. "Louis is getting suspicious about Marcus Chen. He's asking questions about strategy decisions." Weber's voice was calm. Just keep him focused on driving, Anthony. Remind him that he's achieved everything he dreamed of. 7 championships, multiple records, financial security for life. What more could he want? Anthony replied. Lewis loves racing. He doesn't want to retire yet. That's exactly why we need your help, Weber said. Lewis is addicted to competition. If we don't manage his exit carefully, he might make poor decisions that damage his reputation. Listening to this conversation, Lewis realized that Mercedes had used his father's love against him. They convinced Anthony that loving Lewis meant lying to him. Elena played another recording, this one more recent. Anthony's voice sounded more troubled. I'm having second thoughts about this plan. Lewis deserves to know the truth about what you're doing to his career. Weber's voice turned threatening. Anthony, remember what we discussed. If you break our agreement, we'll release information about Lewis that will destroy his reputation forever. Do you really want to risk your son's legacy? Anthony sounded scared. What kind of information? Let's just say we know things about Lewis that the public wouldn't understand, Weber replied coldly. Lewis felt a chill run down his spine. What were they threatening him with? Elena looked uncomfortable. I don't know yet, but there's something in Lewis's medical records that Mercedes has been using as leverage against your family. Lewis felt more confused and scared. What could be in his medical records that was so damaging? Elena closed the laptop and sat next to Lewis on the couch. Your father loves you, Lewis. Everything he did was because he thought he was protecting you. Mercedes manipulated his love and turned it into a weapon against you. Lewis put his head in his hands. He felt angry, sad, and confused, all at the same time. His father had betrayed him, but also been betrayed himself by Mercedes. What about Abu Dhabi? Lewis asked, remembering Elena's earlier comment about the race being planned. Elena opened a different folder on her laptop. December 12th, 2021, the day that changed everything. She showed Lewis technical documents from that race. Radio communications between Mercedes and the race officials. Email exchanges between Mercedes executives and Red Bull team members. The safety car wasn't an accident, Lewis. Mercedes worked with race control to create the perfect setup for Max Verstappen to win the championship. Elena explained how Mercedes had secretly provided information about when the safety car should be deployed. They knew exactly when to create the situation that would give Max fresh tires and put him right behind Lewis for the final restart. Even the decision not to bring you in for new tires was part of the plan, Elena continued. Marcus Chen told the pit crew not to call you in. They wanted you to be vulnerable for Max's attack. Lewis remembered that terrible moment. How he had radioed asking if he should pit for new tires. How his team had told him to stay out. How he had trusted their decision completely. They sacrificed my 8th championship for money, Lewis said, his voice full of pain. $50 million from Red Bull, plus technology sharing agreements for the new car regulations, Elena confirmed. Lewis stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Monaco looked peaceful in the evening light. But inside this small apartment, his entire world was falling apart. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his father. Lewis, are you okay? You sounded strange on the phone earlier. Call me when you get this. Lewis stared at the message. His father was probably worried about him, but Anthony was also part of the conspiracy. How could Lewis ever trust him again? Elena's phone rang. She answered it quickly, and her face went pale. We have to go, she said urgently. They've found this apartment. Someone saw us coming here. As Elena packed her laptop and papers, Lewis felt trapped. Mercedes was hunting them. His father was working against him. His team had stolen his championship. "Elena," Lewis said as they prepared to leave, "you said there was something in my medical records. What aren't you telling me?" Elena stopped, packing, and looked at Lewis with deep sadness in her eyes. "Lewis, the betrayal goes deeper than just racing and money. Mercedes didn't just steal your championships. They've been controlling your entire life since you were a child." Lewis felt his legs go weak. He sat back down on the couch, staring at Elena in disbelief. "What do you mean they've been controlling my life since I was a child? That's impossible." Elena quickly stuffed her laptop into a backpack while talking. "Lewis, do you remember being sick when you were about 8 years old? You had to go to special doctors for several months?" Lewis nodded slowly. "Yes, I had some kind of flu that wouldn't go away. My dad took me to see different doctors until they figured out how to make me better." "Those weren't regular doctors," Elena said, checking the window for any signs of Mercedes security. "They were Mercedes researchers working on a secret project." She pulled out a thick folder of medical documents and handed it to Lewis. "Mercedes has been studying young racing drivers since the 1990s. They were looking for ways to create the perfect driver." Lewis opened the folder and saw his own medical records from when he was 8 years old. But these weren't normal doctor visits. The papers talked about genetic testing, reaction time enhancement, and cognitive modification. "I don't understand these words," Lewis said, feeling scared. Elena sat next to him. Mercedes was experimenting with ways to make young drivers faster, smarter, and better at racing. "You weren't sick, Lewis. You were being modified." Lewis felt like the room was spinning. "Modified? What does that mean?" "They gave you special medicines that changed how your brain works," Elena explained gently. "The treatments made your reflexes faster, your vision sharper, and your ability to process information quicker than normal people." Lewis thought about his childhood. He remembered taking strange-tasting medicine every day for months. His father always said it was to keep him healthy and strong. But Elena was saying it was actually changing who he was. "That's why you're so much better at racing than other drivers," Elena continued. "It's not just natural talent. Mercedes enhanced your abilities when you were too young to understand what was happening." Lewis looked at more documents in the folder. There were charts showing his reaction times before and after the treatments. Brain scans comparing his mental processing to normal children. Blood tests showing unusual chemical levels. "My dad knew about this?" Lewis asked, though he already knew the answer. Elena nodded sadly. "Anthony was told that the treatments would help your racing career. Mercedes convinced him it was like giving you vitamins, but better. They paid him money and promised you would become a professional driver." Lewis felt sick thinking about his 8-year-old self being used as a test subject. He had trusted his father and the doctors, not knowing they were experimenting on him. "Am I the only one?" Lewis asked. "No," Elena replied. "Mercedes tested this program on about 20 young drivers over 10 years. Most of them didn't make it to Formula One. Some had bad reactions to the treatments. Others couldn't handle the pressure." Elena showed Lewis photos of other young drivers who had been part of the program. Some names Lewis recognized as drivers who had promising careers, but suddenly disappeared from racing. Others he had never heard of. "What happened to them?" Lewis asked. "Some got sick from the treatments and had to stop racing," Elena explained. "Others were dropped from the program when Mercedes found better test subjects. A few died in racing accidents, though Mercedes claims that wasn't related to the experiments." Lewis felt horrified. Children had died because of Mercedes's desire to create perfect drivers. "You were their most successful experiment," Elena continued. "That's why. They've been controlling your career so carefully. You're not just a driver to them. You're proof that their program works. Lewis understood now why Mercedes felt they owned him. In their minds, they had created him. His speed, his reflexes, his racing instincts, they believed it all belonged to them. "What about the medical condition they found in my recent tests?" Lewis asked. Elena pulled out newer medical documents. "That's the problem with what they did to you as a child. The genetic modifications are starting to break down as you get older. Your body is rejecting the artificial enhancements." She showed Lewis test results from 2019 that revealed unusual patterns in his blood and brain activity. "This is why Mercedes wanted to end your career now. They know the enhancements won't last much longer." Lewis felt scared about his own body. "Am I going to get sick?" "The condition isn't dangerous," Elena assured him. "But your superhuman reflexes and processing speed will gradually return to normal levels. You'll still be a good driver, just not the enhanced version Mercedes created." Lewis realized that Mercedes planned to end his career before anyone discovered the truth about their experiments. They wanted him to retire while he was still performing at an enhanced level, protecting their secret. "Why didn't they just tell me the truth?" Lewis asked. Elena looked out the window again, then back at Lewis. "Because what they did to you as a child was illegal. Human experimentation on children is a serious crime. If the truth came out, Mercedes executives would go to prison." Lewis understood now why his father had been so scared of Mercedes's threats. They weren't just threatening Lewis's reputation. They were threatening to expose Anthony's role in illegal medical experiments on his own son. "Your father thought he was giving you opportunities," Elena said gently. "He didn't understand he was signing you up to be a test subject." Lewis felt angry at his father, but also sorry for him. Anthony had been manipulated just like Lewis, but the consequences affected Lewis's entire life. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it, and her face went white. "Lewis, we have to leave right now. They're in the building." They could hear footsteps in the hallway outside the apartment. Elena grabbed her backpack and opened the window that led to a fire escape. "This way," she whispered. As they climbed out onto the metal stairs, Lewis heard voices inside Elena's apartment. Mercedes security had found them again. They climbed down the fire escape as quietly as possible. Elena led Lewis through back alleys and small streets, trying to avoid the main roads where Mercedes might be looking for them. "Where can we go?" Lewis asked, as they hid behind a building. "I have one more safe place," Elena said. "But Lewis, there's something else you need to know before we get there. About your teammate, George Russell." Lewis felt his stomach drop. "What about George?" Elena looked around to make sure no one was following them. "George is part of the new program. Mercedes has been testing improved versions of the treatments they gave you. George doesn't know it, but he's been enhanced too." Lewis thought about how well George had been performing this season, how quickly he had adapted to the Mercedes car, how he seemed to have natural speed that developed almost overnight. "That's why your car has been slower than George's," Elena continued. "Mercedes wants to show that their new enhanced drivers are better than their old ones. They're using you to make George look superior." Lewis felt betrayed on another level. His own teammate was unknowingly part of the conspiracy against him. George probably thought he was just naturally talented, not knowing he was enhanced like Lewis. "Does George know?" Lewis asked. "No," Elena replied. "Mercedes learned from their mistakes with you. They decided it's easier to enhance drivers without telling them. George thinks his improved performance is from hard work and natural development." As they walked through the dark streets of Monaco, Lewis realized the conspiracy was bigger than he had imagined. Mercedes wasn't just betraying him. They were running illegal experiments on multiple drivers and covering it up. "Elena," Lewis said, as they reached another small apartment building, "you said there was something personal about why they wanted to destroy my career. What did you mean?" Elena stopped walking and turned to face Lewis. In the dim streetlight, he could see tears in her eyes. "Lewis, the person who started this whole revenge plan against you isn't just a Mercedes executive. It's someone from your past. Someone whose heart you broke 10 years ago." Lewis stopped walking and stared at Elena. "Someone whose heart I broke? What are you talking about?" Elena looked around nervously, then pulled Lewis into the doorway of a closed shop. "Do you remember dating a woman named Isabella Romano in 2012? Lewis thought back 10 years. He had dated several people when he was younger, but Isabella's name brought back specific memories. She was beautiful, smart, and worked in Formula One marketing. They had dated for about 6 months before Lewis decided to focus completely on his racing career. "Yes, I remember Isabella," Lewis said. "We dated for a while, but it ended when I chose to prioritize racing. It wasn't a bad breakup. We just wanted different things." Elena shook her head sadly. "Lewis, Isabella didn't see it that way. She was deeply in love with you. She thought you were going to spend your lives together." Lewis felt confused. "But we were both young. I thought she understood that racing came first for me back then." "She didn't understand," Elena said. "After you left her, Isabella had a complete breakdown. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't work. She blamed racing for taking you away from her." Elena pulled out her phone and showed Lewis an old photo. It was Isabella from 2012, smiling and happy, standing next to Lewis at some racing event. Lewis remembered that day. They had looked like a perfect couple. "Isabella's father is Marcus Weber, the current CEO of Mercedes," Elena revealed. Lewis felt his blood run cold. Marcus Weber was the man who had been planning his downfall for years. The man who had paid his father to betray him. The man who had ordered the Abu Dhabi conspiracy. "Weber watched his daughter suffer for years after you left her," Elena continued. "Isabella never got over you, Lewis. She never married anyone else. She never had the children she wanted. Her father blamed you for destroying his daughter's happiness." Lewis began to understand the personal nature of the revenge plot. This wasn't just about business or money. It was about a father who wanted to hurt the man who broke his daughter's heart. When Weber became Mercedes CEO in 2018, he immediately started planning Project Sunset, Elena explained. He convinced other Mercedes executives that it was about maximizing profits, but really it was about personal revenge. Lewis felt sick thinking about how his past relationship had led to years of betrayal. He genuinely hadn't known how deeply Isabella felt about their relationship. "Where is Isabella now?" Lewis asked. Elena showed Lewis a recent photo on her phone. It was Isabella, but she looked completely different. Her hair was shorter and darker. She wore business suits instead of the casual clothes Lewis remembered. Most shocking of all, she was sitting in a Mercedes conference room with other executives. "Isabella isn't just the CEO's daughter anymore," Elena said quietly. "She's been working at Mercedes for the past 3 years. She's the head of driver relations." Lewis felt like the ground was falling away beneath his feet. "Driver relations? That means—" "She's been your boss, Lewis. For 3 years, Isabella has been in charge of managing your contracts, your race strategies, and your career planning. She's been controlling your professional life while you had no idea who she was." Lewis thought about all the meetings he'd had with Mercedes management. all the contract negotiations, strategy sessions, and career discussions. Isabella had been in those meetings, making decisions about his future, and he had never recognized her. She uses her married name now, Elena explained, Isabella Romano Martinez. That's why you never connected her to the Isabella you used to date. Louis remembered seeing that name on company emails and documents. He had seen it hundreds of times, but never thought about it. Isabella had completely changed her appearance and identity. She got married? Louis asked. Elena looked sad. She married a businessman from Spain in 2015. But people who know her say it was a marriage of convenience, not love. She never got over you, Louis. Louis felt terrible. He had moved on from their relationship easily, not knowing that Isabella had been destroyed by their breakup. While he was winning races and living his dream, she was rebuilding her life around the pain he had caused her. Isabella has been the main architect of your downfall, Elena continued. While her father wanted revenge, she wanted something deeper. She wanted you to feel the same heartbreak and loss that she felt. Elena showed Louis more photos from Isabella's time at Mercedes. Pictures of her in meetings with the executives who had planned Louis's betrayal. Documents with her signature approving the deals with Red Bull Racing. Strategy papers written in her handwriting. She planned every detail of how your career would end, Elena said. The timing of your losses, the way you would find out about the conspiracy, even the emotional impact it would have on you. She studied you for years, learning exactly how to hurt you most. Louis realized that Isabella knew him better than almost anyone. She had loved him once, which meant she understood his hopes, fears, and weaknesses. She had used that intimate knowledge to plan his destruction. Elena led Louis up the stairs to another small apartment. This one belonged to her friend, who was out of town. They would be safe here for a while. Inside the apartment, Elena showed Louis more evidence of Isabella's involvement. Email exchanges between Isabella and her father about the best ways to damage Louis's reputation. Meeting notes where Isabella suggested specific strategies to make Louis lose races. Look at this, Elena said, showing Louis a document from 2020. It was Isabella's handwriting. Louis must lose the 2021 championship in the most painful way possible. He needs to believe he can win until the very last moment. Then have it taken away from him. Only then will he understand what it feels like to have your dreams destroyed. Louis read the words over and over. Isabella had planned the exact way. His 8th championship would be stolen from him. She had designed his heartbreak like an artist creating a painting. The Abu Dhabi race wasn't just about money, Louis realized. It was about making me suffer. Elena nodded. Isabella wanted you to experience the same confusion, betrayal, and helplessness that she felt when you left her. She wanted you to know what it's like when someone you trust destroys your dreams. Louis sat on the couch and put his head in his hands. He felt overwhelmed by the layers of betrayal. His team, his father, and now a woman he had dated 10 years ago. They had all worked together to destroy him. Why didn't she just talk to me? Louis asked. If she was so hurt, why didn't she tell me how she felt back then? Elena sat next to him. Pride, probably. And by the time she realized how much she loved you, you had already moved on. She felt like you had used her and thrown her away. Louis thought about their relationship from Isabella's perspective. Maybe he had been selfish and thoughtless. Maybe he had hurt her more than he realized. But planning years of revenge seemed like too much punishment for a young man's mistakes. There's more, Elena said gently. Isabella didn't just want to hurt your career. She wanted to destroy your ability to trust anyone ever again. Elena showed Louis a final document, a psychological profile that Isabella had written about him. It analyzed his personality, his relationships, and his emotional weaknesses. She studied how to break you completely, Elena said, not just as a driver, but as a person. She wanted to make sure you could never be happy again. Louis felt a chill reading Isabella's analysis of his character. She had described him like a scientist studying an insect. Every strength was identified as a potential weakness. Every relationship was seen as a tool that could be used against him. The conspiracy with your father was her idea, Elena revealed. Isabella knew that betrayal by family would hurt you more than betrayal by your team. She convinced Mercedes to involve Anthony because she wanted to destroy your ability to trust the people you love most. Louis understood now why the betrayal felt so complete. Isabella hadn't just wanted to end his career. She had wanted to end his capacity for happiness and trust. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "Hello, Louis. I think it's time we talked." Elena saw the message and grabbed Louis's arm. "She knows we're here. She knows everything." Louis looked at the message again. After 10 years of planning revenge from the shadows, Isabella Romano Martinez was ready to face him directly. "What does she want?" Louis asked. Elena's phone rang. She answered it, and immediately her face went pale. After a short conversation, she hung up and looked at Louis with fear in her eyes. "That was my contact inside Mercedes," Elena said. "Louis, Isabella isn't just planning to destroy your career anymore. Tomorrow morning, Mercedes is announcing that you're retiring from Formula One due to health concerns. Your racing career ends in less than 12 hours. Louis felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. 12 hours? They can't just announce my retirement without my permission. Elena pulled out her laptop and showed Louis the Mercedes press release that was scheduled to go live at 9 a.m. The headline read, "Lewis Hamilton announces retirement due to medical concerns. A champion's brave decision." "They're using the genetic condition they found in your blood tests," Elena explained. "Mercedes will claim that your reaction times are declining and that continuing to race would be dangerous for you and other drivers." Louis read the fake press release. It was written like he had made the decision himself. The statement talked about his brave choice to prioritize safety over personal glory. It praised his legendary career and graceful exit from the sport. "This makes me sound like I'm dying," Louis said, feeling sick. "That's the point," Elena replied. "If Mercedes claims you're medically unfit to race, no other Formula One team will ever hire you. Your career will be over permanently." Louis realized how perfectly Isabella had planned this final move. She wasn't just ending his time at Mercedes. She was ending his entire racing career. No team would risk hiring a driver with medical concerns. "What about my contract?" Louis asked desperately. Elena showed him the fine print in his Mercedes contract. "There's a clause that allows immediate termination if there are health issues that could affect performance or safety. Mercedes doctors will provide medical evidence supporting their decision." Louis understood that the genetic condition from his childhood experiments was being used as the final weapon against him. Mercedes had created the problem, hidden it from him, and now they were using it to destroy him. "Can't I fight this? Get my own doctors to prove I'm healthy?" Louis asked. "Isabella thought of that too," Elena said sadly. She showed Louis more documents. "Mercedes has already contacted the FIA medical board. They've convinced them that your condition makes you a safety risk. Even if you prove you're healthy now, They'll say the condition could get worse during a race. Lewis felt trapped. Isabella had spent years building the perfect prison for him. Every escape route had been blocked. Every defense had been anticipated. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Isabella. "Stop running, Lewis. Let's end this properly. Meet me where it all began." Lewis stared at the message. Where it all began? What does that mean? Elena looked thoughtful. Where did you and Isabella first meet? Or where did your relationship start? Lewis tried to remember. I think we first met at the Monaco Grand Prix in 2012. There was a party after the race at the yacht club. She was working for one of the sponsors. That must be where she wants to meet, Elena said. Lewis felt torn. Part of him wanted to face Isabella and demand answers. But another part of him was scared of what she might do. She had been planning this confrontation for years. What if it's a trap? Lewis asked. Elena looked at her watch. Lewis, in 10 hours your career will be over unless we can stop this somehow. Maybe talking to Isabella is the only chance you have. Lewis thought about everything he had learned. His team had betrayed him. His father had lied to him. His own enhanced abilities were artificial. A woman he had barely thought about for 10 years had been controlling his life. Elena, Lewis said slowly, there's something I don't understand. You said Mercedes found something in my medical records that they could use against my family. Something they threatened my father with. What was it? Elena looked uncomfortable. Lewis, are you sure you want to know? Some secrets are harder to live with than others. I need to know everything, Lewis said firmly. I can't fight enemies I don't understand. Elena opened a file on her laptop that she had been avoiding. Remember how I told you about the genetic modifications you received as a child? There's something about those treatments that Mercedes discovered recently. She showed Lewis medical reports from 2019, complex documents full of scientific terms that Lewis didn't understand. The treatments they gave you when you were 8 years old didn't just enhance your racing abilities, Elena explained carefully. They also affected other parts of your brain and body in ways the scientists didn't expect. Lewis felt scared. What kind of effects? Elena took a deep breath. The genetic modifications changed your emotional development, Lewis. They made it harder for you to form deep personal relationships. The treatments enhanced your focus and competitive drive, but they suppressed your ability to emotionally connect with other people. Lewis thought about his life. He had always struggled with long-term relationships. He had never been married. He found it easy to walk away from people when racing became more important. He had always thought it was just his personality. You mean I'm not naturally like this? Lewis asked. The treatments made you prioritize achievement over relationships, Elena explained. That's why you could leave Isabella so easily. That's why you've never settled down with anyone. Mercedes didn't just enhance your driving. They programmed you to be emotionally distant. Lewis felt horrified. His inability to love deeply wasn't a character flaw. It was artificial programming created by Mercedes when he was a child. Does this mean I can never have normal relationships? Lewis asked. Elena looked sad. The effects are permanent, Lewis. The emotional modifications can't be reversed. Mercedes essentially programmed you to be alone. Lewis understood now why his father had been so afraid of Mercedes's threats. If this information became public, people would see Lewis as a damaged person, not a racing champion. Sponsors would abandon him. Fans would pity him instead of admiring him. Isabella knows about this, Lewis realized. Elena nodded. She's known for 3 years. That's what makes her revenge so cruel. She fell in love with someone who was artificially programmed not to love her back. Louis felt the full weight of Isabella's pain now. She had given her heart to someone who was literally incapable of loving her the way she deserved. The genetic modifications had made it impossible for Louis to return her feelings. But that means it wasn't really my fault, Louis said. I couldn't help being emotionally distant. That's true, Elena agreed. But Isabella doesn't see it that way. She blames you for not fighting against the programming. She thinks you chose racing over love when really you were modified to make that choice. Louis's phone rang. It was his father calling again. This time, Louis answered. Dad? Louis, son, are you all right? I've been worried about you all day, Anthony said. His voice sounded genuinely concerned. Louis felt angry, but also confused. Dad, I know about the money. I know about the meetings with Mercedes. I know about everything you've been hiding from me. There was a long silence on the phone. Then Anthony spoke in a quiet, broken voice. Louis, I can explain. Please, let me explain. Explain what, Dad? How you sold me out for $2 million? How you helped Mercedes steal my championship? How you lied to my face for years? Anthony started crying on the phone. Louis, they threatened to destroy you completely. They said if I didn't cooperate, they would release information about your medical treatments. I was trying to protect you. Louis felt his anger mixed with sadness. His father had been trapped in the same web of lies and threats that caught everyone around Louis. Dad, did you know about what they did to me as a child? The genetic modifications? Anthony's crying got louder. I thought I was helping your career. The doctors said the treatments would make you a better driver. I never knew they would change who you are as a person. Louis realized his father carried tremendous guilt about the childhood experiments. Anthony had unknowingly allowed Mercedes to program his son's emotions and personality. Louis, Anthony continued through his tears, there's something else you need to know, something I never told anyone, not even Mercedes. Elena was listening to the conversation and looked worried. What is it, Dad? Louis asked. Anthony took a deep breath. The treatments they gave you when you were 8? You weren't their first test subject in our family, son. Louis felt cold fear in his stomach. What do you mean? Before they tested. On you, they tested on me, Anthony revealed. When I was young, before you were born, Mercedes experimented on me too. That's how I knew to trust them when they wanted to treat you. Elena grabbed Louis's arm. This was information she had never seen in any Mercedes files. Dad, what are you saying? Louis asked, though he was starting to understand. Anthony's voice was barely a whisper. Louis, the reason you're so naturally gifted at understanding racing, the reason you could learn so quickly as a child, it's not just because of what they did to you. It's because I passed modified genetics to you when you were born. Louis felt like the world was spinning. His father had been genetically modified before Louis was even conceived. The enhancements in Louis's DNA weren't just from childhood treatments. They were inherited from his father. Louis, Anthony continued, you're not just Mercedes's creation. You're the second generation of their experiment. And they've been planning your entire life since before you were born. Louis dropped his phone. He couldn't speak. He couldn't think. Everything he believed about himself, his family, and his life was a lie. Elena caught the phone before it hit the floor. She could hear Anthony still talking, trying to explain, but Louis couldn't listen anymore. Louis, breathe, Elena said gently. I know this is overwhelming. Louis sat on the couch and put his head in his hands. My entire existence was planned by Mercedes, even before I was born? Elena sat next to him, Your father is telling the truth. I found hints of an earlier experiment in the old files, but I never understood what it meant. Lewis felt like he wasn't even a real person. He was a science project that had been decades in the making. His father's genetics, his own childhood treatments, his racing career, even his personality. Everything had been designed by Mercedes. Why? Lewis asked. Why would they plan something so elaborate? Elena opened her laptop and showed Lewis files she had been saving for last. Because Mercedes wasn't just trying to create fast drivers, Lewis. They were trying to create the perfect corporate asset. She explained that Mercedes's genetic program had two goals. First, create drivers with superhuman abilities. Second, make sure those drivers could be controlled completely. They enhanced your father's genetics to make him loyal and trusting, Elena said. Anthony was programmed to believe in authority figures and follow orders without question. That's why he trusted Mercedes when they wanted to experiment on you. Lewis thought about his father's personality. Anthony had always been respectful to team bosses, doctors, and authority figures. Even when he disagreed with something, he rarely fought back. And me? Lewis asked. You were designed to be emotionally independent, but professionally dependent, Elena explained. Mercedes enhanced your driving abilities, but made you incapable of deep personal relationships. This way, racing would always be the most important thing in your life. Lewis understood the cruel genius of Mercedes's plan. They had created a driver who would never choose love over racing, never leave the sport for family, never prioritize anything except winning. But I did leave Isabella, Lewis pointed out. Elena nodded sadly. That's exactly what you were programmed to do. When you had to choose between love and racing, the genetic modifications made the choice for you. Lewis realized that Isabella never had a real chance. No matter how much she loved him, he was literally designed not to love her back the same way. That's what makes her revenge so personal, Elena continued. Isabella discovered the truth about your genetic programming 3 years ago when she started working at Mercedes. She learned that you didn't choose racing over her. You were forced to by artificial modifications. Elena showed Lewis emails between Isabella and Mercedes scientists. From 2022, Isabella had demanded to see all the research files about Lewis's enhancements. When Isabella learned the truth, it made her even angrier, Elena explained. She felt like she had fallen in love with a robot, not a real person. Lewis read one of Isabella's emails to the Mercedes research team. You stole his ability to love me. You programmed him to break my heart. This isn't just about Lewis anymore. This is about what you did to both of us. Lewis felt terrible for Isabella. She had not only lost the man she loved, but she had also learned that their entire relationship was contaminated by scientific manipulation. Is that why the revenge became so elaborate? Lewis asked. Elena nodded. Isabella wanted Mercedes to suffer for what they had done, but she also wanted you to understand what it felt like to have your choices taken away from you. Elena showed Lewis Isabella's master plan for Project Sunset. It wasn't just about ending Lewis's career, it was about making him experience the same helplessness that Isabella had felt. She wanted you to lose your championships the same way she lost your love, Elena explained. Not through fair competition, but through manipulation and betrayal. Lewis understood now why Isabella had designed his downfall to be so emotionally devastating. She wanted him to feel as powerless as she had felt when genetic programming made him choose racing over her. Elena's phone buzzed with an urgent message. She read it, and her face went pale. Lewis, we have to leave. Now. Mercedes security is surrounding this building. They could hear voices in the hallway outside, heavy footsteps on the stairs. car doors slamming on the street below. Elena grabbed her backpack and opened the window. The fire escape again? But when they looked outside, they saw Mercedes security guards positioned around the building. There was no way to escape without being seen. "We're trapped," Lewis said. Elena checked her phone. "It's 11 p.m. We have less than 10 hours before they announce your retirement." Lewis heard footsteps stopping outside their door. Someone was testing the door handle. "Dr. Vasquez? Mr. Hamilton? We know you're in there." It was a man's voice, calm and professional. Elena looked at Lewis. "What do we do?" Lewis made a decision. "We face them. I'm tired of running from the truth." The door opened, and 3 Mercedes security guards walked in. They were dressed in dark suits and looked like corporate lawyers, not violent criminals. Behind them walked a woman Lewis hadn't seen in 10 years, but he recognized her immediately despite all the changes. Isabella Romano Martinez looked older, more serious, more powerful than the young woman he had dated, but her eyes were the same. Intelligent, intense, and now filled with pain. "Hello, Lewis," Isabella said calmly. "I think it's time we had a conversation." Lewis stood up to face the woman who had been destroying his life for 3 years. "Isabella, you look different." She smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. 10 years of heartbreak will change a person. You look exactly the same, though. Still handsome, still confident, still completely unaware of how much pain you cause other people. Elena stepped protectively closer to Lewis. "Isabella, this has gone far enough. You can't destroy Lewis's entire career because of a relationship that ended 10 years ago." Isabella looked at Elena with cold eyes. "Dr. Vasquez, you understand the science, but you don't understand the human cost. You've seen the research files, but you haven't lived with the consequences." Isabella turned back to Lewis. "Do you know what it was like, loving someone who was literally programmed not to love me back? Do you know what it feels like to realize that every moment of our relationship was contaminated by genetic manipulation?" Lewis felt genuinely sorry for Isabella, but also angry about what she had done to him. "Isabella, I never knew about the programming. I thought I was just focused on my career. If I had known—" "What?" Isabella interrupted. "If you had known, would you have fought against the programming? Would you have chosen me over racing?" Lewis couldn't answer honestly. Even knowing about the genetic modifications now, he still felt like racing was the most important thing in his life. Isabella saw his hesitation and laughed bitterly. "Exactly. Even now, knowing the truth, you can't imagine choosing love over victory. That's how thoroughly they programmed you." One of the security guards handed Isabella a tablet. She looked at it and smiled. "Lewis, I have some news that might interest you. At 9 a.m. tomorrow, Mercedes will announce your retirement. But that's not all they're announcing." She turned the tablet toward Lewis. On the screen was another press release scheduled for 10 a.m. Mercedes welcomes Isabella Romano Martinez as new team principal, a historic appointment. Lewis felt shocked. "You're taking over the team?" Isabella nodded. "After your retirement is announced, there will be questions about leadership changes at Mercedes. My father is stepping down as CEO, and I'm being promoted to run the racing team." Lewis realized that Isabella hadn't just planned his destruction. She had planned to take his place. She would be in charge of the team that had been his home for years. "Why?" Lewis asked. "You've already won. You've destroyed my career. Why take over Mercedes, too?" Isabella's mask of calm finally cracked, and Lewis saw the deep pain she had been carrying for 10 years. "Because I want to build something better. than what Mercedes created, she said, tears starting to form in her eyes. I want to end their genetic experiments. I want to stop them from creating more drivers like you, people who are programmed to be incapable of love. Louis realized that Isabella's revenge wasn't just about hurting him. It was about stopping Mercedes from hurting other people the way they had hurt both of them. Isabella, Louis said gently, if you really want to stop Mercedes's experiments, we should work together. You don't have to destroy me to expose them. Isabella wiped her eyes and looked at Louis with a mixture of love and hatred. Louis, there's one more thing you need to know. Tomorrow isn't just about announcing your retirement and my promotion. Mercedes is also announcing the launch of their new enhanced driver program, featuring the next generation of genetically modified racers. Louis felt horrified. They're going to create more drivers like me. Isabella nodded. 20 young drivers, ages 8 to 12, are already enrolled in the program. Unless someone stops Mercedes, they'll create an entire generation of people who are programmed to be incapable of normal human relationships. Louis understood now that the stakes were bigger than just his career. If Mercedes wasn't stopped, they would create dozens more people like him, talented but emotionally damaged. What can we do? Louis asked. Isabella looked at her watch. In 8 hours, Louis, you'll face a choice. You can accept your retirement quietly and let Mercedes continue their experiments, or you can help me destroy them completely. She signaled to her security guards, who stepped back toward the door. But, Louis, Isabella said, turning back to him one final time, helping me means sacrificing everything. Your reputation, your legacy, your financial security, everything you've worked for will be destroyed in the process. Isabella walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. The choice is yours, Louis. But remember, for the first time in your life, you have the chance to choose love over victory. Can you do it, or are you still too programmed to be human? Isabella and her security guards left Louis and Elena alone, in the apartment. The silence felt heavy and dangerous. Louis sat on the couch, staring at the floor, trying to process everything that had just happened. Louis, Elena said softly, "Are you okay?" Louis looked up at her. I don't know what okay means anymore. Everything I thought I knew about myself is wrong. Elena sat next to him. The genetic programming doesn't make you less human, Louis. You still have choices. You still have feelings. Do I? Louis asked. Or are my feelings just programmed responses? When I feel sad about losing a race, is that real emotion or artificial programming? Elena didn't have an answer. The line between real personality and genetic modification was impossible to see clearly. Louis stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Monaco looked peaceful in the night. People were living normal lives, making normal choices, feeling normal. Emotions. Louis envied them. Elena, Louis said without turning around, do you think Isabella is right? Should I help her destroy Mercedes, even if it means destroying myself? Elena thought carefully before answering. Louis, 20 children are about to have their lives changed forever. If Mercedes continues their experiments, those kids will grow up unable to form real relationships, just like you. Louis thought about his own childhood. The treatments, the home medicine, the doctors who changed his brain chemistry. He remembered being 8 years old and trusting the adults who said they were helping him. Those children don't know what's being done to them, Louis said. Their parents probably think, it's just medical treatment, like my father did. Elena nodded. And in 20 years, those children will be asking the same questions you're asking now. wondering what's real and what's programmed. Lewis made his decision. I have to stop them. I can't let Mercedes do to those children what they did to me. Elena looked relieved. So you'll help Isabella? Lewis turned away from the window. No, I'll stop Mercedes, but I won't work with Isabella. Her methods are wrong. She's been lying and manipulating people just like Mercedes does. Elena looked confused. Then how will you stop them? Isabella has all the power now. Lewis thought about his options. He could go public with the truth. But who would believe such an incredible story? He could try to contact the parents of the children in the program, but he didn't know who they were. I need to get evidence that's so clear no one can deny it, Lewis said. Video recordings, medical documents, proof that even Mercedes can't explain away. Elena opened her laptop. I have a lot of evidence already, but you're right. We need something undeniable. Lewis's phone buzzed with a text message from Isabella. Meet me at the Monaco Yacht Club at midnight if you want to see the children's files. Come alone. Lewis showed the message to Elena. She's testing me, seeing if I'll trust her. Elena looked worried. It could be a trap. Isabella has been manipulating you for years. Why would she help you now? Lewis thought about Isabella's tears earlier. Despite all her anger and revenge, he had seen genuine pain in her eyes when she talked about stopping the experiments on children. Maybe she really does want to end Mercedes' program, Lewis said. Maybe her revenge against me and her desire to protect children are two separate things. Elena checked her watch. It's 11:30 p.m. If you're going to meet her, you need to leave. Now! Lewis put on his jacket. If I don't come back by 2 a.m., call the police and give them all the evidence we have. Elena grabbed his arm. Lewis, be careful. Isabella has been planning this confrontation for 10 years. She knows exactly what she wants to say to you. Lewis nodded and left the apartment. As he walked through the quiet streets of Monaco, he thought about the conversation he was about to have. What could he say to Isabella? How could he apologize for pain he had caused without knowing it? How could he convince her to help him without trusting her completely? The Monaco Yacht Club was almost empty at midnight. A few security guards nodded at Lewis as he entered. His fame still opened doors, even in the middle of a personal crisis. Lewis found Isabella sitting alone at a table overlooking the harbor. She had changed out of her business suit into a simple black dress. She looked more like the woman he had dated 10 years ago. You came, Isabella said without looking at him. Lewis sat across from her. You said you had files about the children. Isabella pushed a tablet across the table. 20 children, ages 8 to 12. Their parents think they're enrolled in a sports medicine program to improve athletic performance. Lewis looked at the files, photos of young children with their names, ages, and medical treatment schedules. They looked happy and innocent, just like Lewis had been at their age. Their parents signed contracts giving Mercedes permission to provide enhanced sports medicine, Isabella explained. They don't know their children are being genetically modified. Lewis felt sick looking at the children's faces. When do the treatments start? They already started, Isabella said quietly. 3 weeks ago. The first round of genetic modifications has already been given to all 20 children. Lewis felt angry and helpless. We're too late to prevent it, but maybe we can stop the next rounds. Isabella finally looked at Lewis. In the dim light of the yacht club, she looked tired and sad. Lewis, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Lewis nodded. If you had known about the genetic programming 10 years ago, would you have chosen differently? Would you have chosen me over racing? Louis looked into Isabella's eyes. He wanted to give her the answer that would make her feel better. But he also wanted to be truthful. "I don't know," Louis said honestly. "I want to say yes, but I can't be sure. The programming was so strong, and racing felt like the most important thing in the world to me." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "That's what I thought you would say." Louis reached across the table and touched Isabella's hand. "But I can tell you this, knowing what I know now, I would fight against the programming. I would try to make different choices." Isabella looked at their hands, touching. "Louis, do you know why I really wanted to meet you here?" Louis shook his head. "This is where we first danced together," Isabella said. 10 years ago, after the Monaco Grand Prix. There was a party here, and we danced on the terrace overlooking the water." Louis remembered that night. It had been one of the happiest moments of their relationship. They had felt young and free and full of possibilities. "I fell in love with you that night," Isabella continued. "Not because you were a famous racing driver, but because you laughed at my jokes and listened when I talked about my dreams." Louis felt the weight of Isabella's love and the tragedy of what had been lost between them. "Isabella," Louis said gently, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I didn't understand how much you cared. I'm sorry Mercedes programmed me to be incapable of loving you the way you deserved." Isabella wiped her eyes. "I know it wasn't really your fault, Louis. That's what makes it so painful. I can't even hate you properly, because you were a victim too." They sat in silence for a moment, both thinking about what might have been if Mercedes hadn't interfered with Louis's emotional development. "Louis," Isabella said, "I have a confession. I didn't just bring you here to give you the children's files." Louis felt worried. "What do you mean?" Isabella pulled out her phone and showed Louis a recording app. "I've been recording our conversation. Tomorrow morning, when Mercedes announces your retirement, I'm also going to release this recording to the media." Louis felt betrayed again. "You're still manipulating me. Even now, when we're talking about protecting children, you're recording me without permission." Isabella looked ashamed. "I know it's wrong. But Louis, your words tonight, your admission that you might have chosen racing over love, even without the programming, that's what I need people to hear." Louis stood up angrily. "You want to use my honesty against me? You want to make me look like a heartless person who chose victory over love?" Isabella stood up too. "No, Louis. I want people to understand how deep Mercedes's programming goes. I want them to see that even you, knowing the truth, still struggle against the modifications they gave you." Louis realized that Isabella was still thinking like a person seeking revenge, not like someone trying to protect children. "Isabella, if you release that recording, it will destroy my credibility. No one will believe anything I say about Mercedes's experiments." Isabella looked conflicted. "Louis, I've spent 3 years planning your downfall. I don't know how to stop wanting revenge." Louis sat back down and looked at Isabella with compassion. "The genetic modifications didn't just hurt me, Isabella. They hurt you too. Mercedes turned you into someone consumed by revenge, instead of someone capable of healing." Isabella started crying. "I don't know how to forgive you, Louis. I don't know how to forgive Mercedes. I don't even know how to forgive myself for what I've become." Louis realized that Isabella was as trapped by her pain as he was trapped by his programming. "Isabella," Louis said, "we can't change the past, but we can change what happens to those 20 children. Will you help me save them?" Isabella looked at Louis through her tears. "If I help you, I have to give up my revenge. I have to let go of the anger that's been driving me for 10 years. Lewis nodded. Yes, but you'll also have the chance to do something good. Something that matters more than our personal pain. Isabella stared at her phone for a long moment. Then she deleted the recording she had made. Okay, Lewis, I'll help you save the children. But I need to know, are you doing this to be a hero? Or are you doing this because it's right? Lewis thought about her question. I don't know the difference anymore. Maybe it doesn't matter as long as we stop Mercedes. Isabella smiled for the first time since they had reunited. Maybe you're more human than either of us thought. She pushed another tablet across the table. Here's everything you need to expose. Mercedes's new program. Medical records, parent contracts, treatment schedules, everything. Lewis looked at the evidence. It was enough to destroy Mercedes and save the children, but it would also destroy his own career and reputation. Isabella, Lewis said, when this is over, what happens to us? Isabella looked out at the harbor. I don't know, Lewis. Maybe we can learn to be friends. Maybe we're too damaged to have any kind of relationship. But for the first time in 10 years, I'm willing to find out. Lewis felt something he had never experienced before. Hope for a future that included another person. There's one more thing, Isabella said. Mercedes isn't just announcing your retirement tomorrow. They're also planning to have you committed to a mental health facility. Lewis felt his blood run cold. What? Isabella showed him one final document. They're going to claim that the stress of discovering your genetic modifications has caused a mental breakdown. Any accusations you make about Mercedes will be dismissed as paranoid delusions. Lewis realized that Mercedes had planned for every possibility, including Lewis discovering the truth. How much time do we have? Lewis asked. Isabella looked at her watch. The press conference is in 8 hours. The ambulance to take you to the mental facility is scheduled to arrive at your hotel in 6 hours. Lewis stood up urgently. Then we need to move fast. Isabella, are you really ready to give up everything to stop Mercedes? Isabella stood up too. Yes, Lewis. For the first time in 10 years, I'm ready to choose love over revenge. Lewis felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. Isabella was finally on his side. Together, they might be able to stop Mercedes before it was too late. What's our plan? Lewis asked urgently. Isabella pulled out her phone and started making calls. First, we need to get you somewhere safe. Mercedes will be looking for you at your hotel and Elena's apartment, Lewis thought quickly. What about your place? They won't expect me to be with you. Isabella shook her head. Too risky. My apartment is probably being watched, too. She paused, thinking. Wait, I know a place. She led Lewis out of the yacht club and to her car parked nearby. As they drove through the empty streets of Monaco, Isabella explained her idea. My mother has a small house in the hills outside Monaco. She's visiting my aunt in Italy this week. We can hide there and plan our next move. Lewis felt nervous about being alone with Isabella, but he didn't have other options. Time was running out fast. The house was small and cozy, with a view of Monaco's lights twinkling below. Isabella made coffee while Lewis studied the evidence she had given him. Isabella, Lewis said, looking through the medical files, these children's treatments are much more advanced than what they did to me and my father. The genetic modifications are stronger. Isabella sat next to Lewis on the couch. Mercedes learned from their mistakes with earlier experiments. They're creating children who will be even more enhanced than you, but also even more controlled. Lewis, read about the new modifications. The children would have faster reflexes, better vision, and improved decision-making abilities. But they would also be programmed to be completely loyal to Mercedes and incapable of questioning authority. "They're creating perfect corporate slaves," Lewis said with disgust. Isabella nodded. "And if we don't stop them tonight, these children will never have real choices about their lives." Lewis looked at Isabella seriously. "If we expose this, both of our lives will be destroyed." "Are you really ready for that?" Isabella looked out the window at the lights of Monaco. "Lewis, I've spent 10 years being angry and bitter. I've hurt people I care about. I've become someone I don't like. Maybe it's time to do something good, even if it costs me everything." Lewis felt admiration for Isabella's courage. Despite all the pain between them, she was willing to sacrifice her new position at Mercedes to protect children she had never met. "Okay," Lewis said. "How do we expose Mercedes in a way that people will believe?" Isabella opened her laptop. "We need to release everything at the same time. Medical records, financial documents, recorded conversations, video evidence. So much proof that Mercedes can't deny it or discredit us." Lewis thought about the logistics. "We need to contact journalists, government officials, Formula One authorities, and the parents of the children all at once." Isabella was already typing on her laptop. "I have contacts at major newspapers, television stations, and racing publications. I can send them everything simultaneously." Lewis looked at his watch. It was 1 a.m. They had 5 hours before Mercedes tried to have him committed, and 8 hours before the press conference announcing his retirement. "What about Elena?" Lewis asked. "She has evidence too, and she might be in danger." Isabella picked up her phone. "I'll call her and tell her to meet us here." While Isabella made arrangements, Lewis thought about what they were about to do. Exposing Mercedes would end his racing career for certain. No team would hire a driver connected to such a scandal. His reputation would be destroyed. His financial future would be uncertain. But when he looked at the photos of the 20 children, Lewis knew he was making the right choice. Their innocent faces reminded him of himself at that age, trusting adults who claimed to be helping him. Isabella finished her phone calls. "Elena is coming here. I also contacted my friend who works at the Monaco police. He'll make sure we're protected when Mercedes realizes what we're doing." Lewis felt grateful for Isabella's help. "Why are you doing all this for me? After everything that happened between us?" Isabella sat next to Lewis again. "Because I finally understand that we were both victims, Lewis. Mercedes didn't just modify your genetics. They destroyed any chance we had at real love." Lewis looked into Isabella's eyes. "Do you think we could have been happy together if Mercedes hadn't interfered?" Isabella smiled sadly. "I don't know, but I wish we had been able to find out naturally." There was a moment of silence between them. Lewis felt something he had never experienced before, the desire to protect someone else's feelings instead of just focusing on his own goals. "Isabella," Lewis said carefully, "when this is over, would you like to try being friends? Real friends, without any manipulation or revenge?" Isabella touched Lewis's hand gently. "I'd like that very much." Elena arrived at 2 a.m. with all her evidence, files. She looked surprised to see Lewis and Isabella working together peacefully. "What changed?" Elena asked. Isabella looked at Lewis. "We realized that protecting children is more important than our personal pain." Elena set up her laptop next to Isabella's. "I've been preparing press releases all night. Everything is ready to send to news organizations around the world." Lewis reviewed the materials one more time. Medical documents proving genetic experimentation, financial records showing payments for illegal research, recorded conversations between Mercedes executives, photos of the 20 children currently being modified. This will destroy Mercedes completely, Lewis said. Isabella nodded. And it will start criminal investigations in multiple countries. Mercedes executives will probably go to prison. Elena looked worried. Including your father, Isabella. Marcus, Weber will be arrested for authorizing illegal human experimentation. Isabella's face showed pain, but her voice was steady. My father made his choices. I can't protect him from the consequences. Lewis admired Isabella's strength. She was willing to send her own father to prison to protect innocent children. Are we ready? Lewis asked. Isabella and Elena both nodded. At 3 a.m., they began sending evidence to journalists, government officials, and law enforcement agencies around the world. Press releases went to every major news organization. Medical documents went to health authorities. Financial records went to police investigators. Lewis watched as their emails flew across the internet, carrying the truth about Mercedes's genetic experiments to hundreds of people simultaneously. There's no stopping it. Now, Elena said. Isabella's phone started ringing with calls from journalists who had received the evidence. News organizations wanted to verify the information and schedule interviews. The story will be everywhere by morning, Isabella said, answering call after call. Lewis felt nervous and excited at the same time. By sunrise, the whole world would know the truth about genetic experimentation in Formula One. At 4 a.m., Isabella received a call that made her face go pale. After hanging up, she looked at Lewis with concern. That was my contact at Mercedes. They know what we've done. Security teams are being sent to find us. Elena packed up her laptop quickly. We need to leave here. But Isabella shook her head. There's nowhere to run. Mercedes has resources everywhere. We need to stay and face whatever happens. Lewis made a decision. Then we make one final statement. Something so public that Mercedes can't silence us. Isabella looked curious. What do you mean? Lewis pulled out his phone and opened his social media accounts. He had millions of followers around the world who looked up to him. I'm going to tell my fans everything. Live video, right now, while the evidence is spreading. Even if Mercedes stops us later, the truth will already be out there. Elena set up her laptop to record Lewis's statement. Isabella stood beside him, ready to support his words with her own testimony. Lewis looked into the camera and began speaking to his fans around the world. My name is Lewis Hamilton, and I need to tell you something that will change everything you think you know about Formula One, about Mercedes, and about me. As Lewis spoke, his phone showed thousands of people joining the live stream. Comments poured in from shocked fans as he explained the genetic experiments, the betrayals, and the conspiracy that had controlled his entire life. Isabella added her own testimony, explaining her role in the revenge plot and her decision to help expose Mercedes instead. Elena showed medical documents and played recorded conversations that proved every claim they were making. By 5 a.m., Lewis's live stream had been watched by over 10 million people. The video was being shared across every social media platform. News organizations were picking up the story. Government officials were promising investigations. It's done, Lewis said, ending the live stream. The truth is out there, and no one can stop it now. Isabella looked at her phone, which was buzzing with calls from Mercedes executives, journalists, and government officials. Lewis, Mercedes is announcing an emergency press conference in 2 hours. They're going to try to do damage control. Elena was monitoring news websites on her laptop. The story is already trending worldwide. Mercedes Experiments is the top hashtag on social media. Lewis felt exhausted, but satisfied. Whatever happened next, he had told the truth. and tried to protect the 20 children being experimented on. Isabella's phone rang with a call from her father, Marcus Weber. She answered it and put it on speaker so Louis and Elena could hear. "Isabella, what have you done?" Marcus's voice was angry and scared. "I've done what you should have done years ago, Dad. I've told the truth about what Mercedes has been doing to children." Marcus's voice became threatening. "You have no idea what you've unleashed. Mercedes has powerful friends. This won't end well for any of you." Isabella looked at Louis with determination. "Maybe not, Dad. But at least those 20 children will be safe." Marcus hung up angrily. At 6 a.m., they heard cars pulling up outside the house. Through the windows, they could see Mercedes security. "Vehicles surrounding the property. They found us," Elena said nervously. Louis stood up and walked to the window. He could see at least a dozen Mercedes security guards positioning themselves around the house. Isabella joined Louis at the window. "Whatever happens next, Louis, I want you to know that I'm glad we chose to work together instead of destroying each other." Louis looked at Isabella and felt something he had never experienced before. Genuine care for another person that had nothing to do with racing or winning. "Isabella," Louis said, "I think I'm finally learning what it means to choose love over victory." Outside, the Mercedes security guards were approaching the front door. Louis, Isabella, and Elena prepared to face whatever consequences awaited them for telling the truth about one of the most powerful companies in the world. The front door opened without anyone knocking. 6 Mercedes security guards walked into the house, followed by Marcus Weber himself. Louis hadn't seen Isabella's father in person before, but the family resemblance was clear. Weber had the same intelligent eyes as Isabella, but his were cold and angry. "Isabella," Weber said, looking at his daughter with disappointment, "you've made a terrible mistake." Isabella stood up straighter. "No, Dad. You made the terrible mistake when you decided to experiment on children." Weber ignored Louis and Elena, focusing only on his daughter. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Mercedes stock has already dropped 30% in early trading. Governments are opening criminal investigations. Our entire company could be destroyed." "Good," Isabella said firmly. "Maybe it should be destroyed." Weber walked to the window and looked out at the Mercedes security vehicles. "The 3 of you think you've won, but you don't understand how powerful Mercedes really is. This scandal won't stick. We'll find ways to discredit all of you." Louis stood up. "Mr. Weber, the evidence is already public. Millions of people have seen it. You can't put that back in the bottle." Weber finally looked at Louis with pure hatred. "Louis Hamilton, the ungrateful experiment who bit the hand that made him." Louis felt angry but stayed calm. "You didn't make me, Mr. Weber. You modified me." "There's a difference," Weber laughed coldly. "Is there? Everything you are, everything you've accomplished, comes from Mercedes research. Your speed, your reflexes, your success, it's all our creation." Isabella stepped between her father and Louis. "Chai, that's not true, Dad. Louis had talent and determination that were completely his own." Weber looked at his daughter sadly. "Isabella, you still don't understand, do you? The experiments on Louis were just the beginning. Mercedes has been working on genetic enhancement for 30 years. Elena opened her laptop and started recording. "Keep talking, Mr. Weber. The world should hear this." Weber noticed the recording but didn't seem to care. "Fine. Let me tell you the whole truth, since you think you're so clever." He walked to the center of the room like he was giving a business presentation. "Mercedes didn't just experiment on Lewis and his father. We've been modifying the genetics of promising young people for 3 decades. Lewis felt shocked. How many people? Weber smiled cruelly. Hundreds. Drivers, engineers, designers, even team executives. Half of Formula One has been enhanced by Mercedes research. Isabella looked horrified. Dad, you're talking about hundreds of people whose lives you've controlled. Weber nodded. And not just in racing. Mercedes has partnerships with other companies. We've enhanced athletes in football, tennis, swimming. We've modified the genetics of musicians, artists, even politicians. Elena was typing notes while recording. This is bigger than we imagined. Weber continued his confession like he was proud of it. The goal was to create a better class of human being. People with enhanced abilities, but also enhanced loyalty to their corporate sponsors. Lewis realized the scope of Mercedes' conspiracy was massive. You've been trying to control entire industries. Not trying, Weber corrected. Succeeding. Do you think Lewis is the only genetically enhanced Formula One driver? Max Verstappen? Charles Leclerc? George Russell? They've all been modified. Isabella looked sick. You've turned professional sports into a competition between different genetic experiments, Weber nodded. Exactly. And the public loves it. They think they're watching natural human achievement. But really, they're watching our scientific progress. Lewis thought about all his racing rivals. The drivers he had competed against, respected, sometimes beaten, they were all artificial, creations like him. What about the drivers who refused the modifications? Lewis asked. Weber's expression turned dark. There weren't many. Most parents were eager to give their children advantages. But the few who refused, he shrugged. Let's just say their careers didn't go well. Elena looked up from her laptop. You're talking about sabotage. Deliberately harming people who wouldn't cooperate. Weber smiled coldly. I'm talking about market forces. Enhanced drivers naturally outperform unenhanced ones. Non-modified athletes simply couldn't compete. Isabella was crying now. Dad, you've destroyed the meaning of human achievement. Nothing is real anymore. Weber walked to his daughter and tried to touch her face, but she pulled away. Isabella, we gave people the chance to be better than nature intended. That's progress. Lewis felt disgusted. You took away people's right to choose their own paths. You decided what they should become before they were old enough to understand. Weber turned to Lewis with anger. And look what we created. You're one of the greatest racing drivers in history. Isn't that worth something? Not if it's built on lies, Lewis replied. Weber pulled out his phone and showed them a news alert. The 20 children in our current program have already been moved to a secure facility. Even if you stop Mercedes, those modifications will continue. Elena looked panicked. Where are the children? Weber smiled. Somewhere you'll never find. Them. And by next week, they'll have completed the full enhancement process. There will be no reversing what we've done. Isabella grabbed her father's arm. Dad, please! Those are innocent children. Let them go home to their families. Weber pulled his arm away. Those children are the future, Isabella. They'll be faster, stronger, and smarter than any previous generation. Their parents should be grateful. Lewis made a decision. Mr. Weber, I'll make you a deal. Tell us where the children are, and I'll publicly say that Mercedes enhanced me, with my full knowledge and consent. Weber looked interested. You'd lie to protect your reputation and ours? I'd lie to save 20 children from a lifetime of genetic slavery, Lewis corrected. Isabella looked at Lewis with admiration. Even now, when he could save himself, Lewis was choosing to protect others. Weber considered the offer. Interesting. But not good enough. The damage to Mercedes is already too severe. Elena's phone buzzed with an urgent notification. She read it, and her face went pale. "Louis, Isabella, you need to see this." She turned her laptop screen toward them. A breaking news report was showing footage of police raids on Mercedes facilities around the world. Officers were seizing documents and arresting executives. "The evidence we released has triggered coordinated international law enforcement action," Elena explained. "Mercedes executives are being arrested in Germany, England, and the United States." Weber looked at the news footage with shock. He pulled out his phone and made several calls, but no one was answering. "The company board is cutting ties with anyone connected to the genetic program," Weber said, his confidence finally shaking. "They're trying to save the car manufacturing business by sacrificing the racing division." Isabella felt sorry for her father despite everything he had done. "Dad, if you help us find those children, maybe the prosecutors will be more lenient." Weber sat down heavily on the couch. For the first time, he looked like a defeated old man instead of a powerful corporate executive. "The children are at a medical facility in Switzerland," Weber said quietly. "The Bergmann Institute outside Zurich. They're being held under the pretense of a special sports medicine program." Elena was already looking up the facility on her laptop. "I found it. It's a private medical research center." Louis felt hope. "If we can get Swiss authorities to investigate the facility, they might be able to stop the treatments." Isabella was making phone calls to law enforcement contacts. "I'm calling the Swiss police and Interpol. They can coordinate a raid on the facility." Weber looked at his daughter with sadness. "Isabella, you realize this means I'll probably spend the rest of my life in prison?" Isabella stopped making calls and looked at her father. "Dad, you experimented on children. You stole their right to normal human development. You deserve to face consequences." Weber nodded slowly. "I suppose I do. I convinced myself I was advancing human evolution. But really, I was just playing God with other people's lives." Elena received a message on her laptop. "Swiss authorities are already moving. They're coordinating with Interpol to raid the Bergmann Institute within the hour." Louis felt relief. "The children might be saved." Weber stood up and walked to the window. "Even if you save those 20 children, there are hundreds of others who have already been modified. The damage is permanent for them." Isabella joined her father at the window. "Maybe we can help them understand what was done to them. Give them the choice to live their lives with full knowledge." Weber looked at Isabella with respect for the first time. "You're stronger than I ever was, Isabella. You chose to do the right thing, even when it hurt people you love." Louis watched the interaction between father and daughter. Despite everything Weber had done, Isabella still loved him enough to want him to find redemption. "Mr. Weber," Louis said, "if you testify honestly about everything Mercedes has done, you might be able to help other enhanced people understand their own situations." Weber nodded. "I suppose that's something. I can't undo the modifications, but I can help people live with the truth." Isabella's phone rang with a call from Swiss police. After a brief conversation, she hung up with tears of joy in her eyes. "The children have been found," Isabella announced. "Swiss authorities raided the Bergmann Institute 20 minutes ago. All 20 children are safe and are being returned to their families." Louis felt overwhelming relief. They had actually done it. They had saved the children. Elena was monitoring news feeds on her laptop. The story is spreading everywhere. Mercedes stock has been suspended from trading. Government ministers are calling for investigations into genetic enhancement in all sports. Weber sat back down and put his head in his hands. 30 years of research gone. Hundreds of careers built on enhancement, exposed. The entire structure of professional sports will have to change. Isabella sat next to her father. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Dad. Maybe sports should be about natural human achievement instead of corporate genetic experiments. Louis thought about his own career. Everything he had accomplished was tainted by artificial enhancement. But somehow, saving those 20 children felt more important than any racing victory he had ever achieved. What happens now? Louis asked. Elena closed her laptop. Now the legal system takes over. There will be trials, investigations, and probably new laws about genetic enhancement. Weber looked at Louis with something that might have been respect. Louis, I owe you an apology. I created you to be our perfect corporate athlete, but you became something better. You became someone who chooses protecting others over protecting yourself. Louis felt like he was finally understanding what it meant to be truly human instead of just genetically enhanced. Isabella stood up and looked out at the Mercedes security vehicles, which were driving away as news of the arrests spread. Louis, Isabella said, I have one more confession. When I started planning your downfall 3 years ago, I thought I was getting revenge for a broken heart. But really, I was trying to become human again myself. Louis looked at Isabella with understanding. The genetic modifications didn't just affect drivers. They affected everyone who loved enhanced people. Isabella nodded. I spent 10 years feeling like I wasn't good enough for someone who was literally designed to be superhuman. It took me until today to realize that being human is better than being perfect. Weber stood up and walked toward the door. I should turn myself into the authorities. There's no point in running. Isabella hugged her father goodbye. Dad, maybe in prison, you can help prosecutors understand how deep this conspiracy goes. Maybe you can help other enhanced people find peace with what was done to them. Weber nodded and walked outside to the waiting police cars that had replaced the Mercedes security vehicles. Louis, Isabella, and Elena were finally alone in the small house overlooking Monaco. What do we do now? Elena asked. Louis looked at Isabella. Now we try to build something real, something based on truth instead of genetic programming. Isabella smiled at Louis. Do you think that's possible? For either of us? Louis took Isabella's hand. I don't know. But for the first time in my life, I want to try choosing love over victory. 3 months later, Lewis Hamilton stood in a courtroom in Geneva, Switzerland. He was wearing a simple black suit instead of his racing overalls. The room was packed with journalists, lawyers, and families of the children who had been saved from Mercedes's genetic experiments. Lewis was there to testify against Mercedes executives in the biggest sports scandal in history. Over the past months, the investigation had revealed that Mercedes had enhanced over 300 athletes across different sports. Formula One, football, tennis, swimming, entire competitions had been influenced by genetic modifications. Mr. Hamilton, the prosecutor said, please tell the court about your experience with Mercedes's genetic enhancement program. Lewis looked out at the courtroom. In the front row sat Isabella, who had also testified against her own father's company. Next to her sat Elena, who had become the lead expert witness in the case. Behind them were the parents of the 20 children who had been rescued. I was 8 years old when Mercedes started experimenting on me, Lewis began. I trusted the doctors because my father told me they were helping me become a better racing driver. I didn't know they were changing my brain chemistry and emotional development. Lewis testified for 2 hours, explaining how the genetic modifications had affected his relationships, his decision-making, and his ability to form emotional connections. He talked about the pain of discovering that his entire career was built on artificial enhancements. The defense lawyer for Mercedes tried to argue that Lewis had benefited from the modifications. Mr. Hamilton, didn't these treatments help you become one of the greatest racing drivers in history? Lewis looked directly at the lawyer. Yes, they made me faster and more focused, but they also made me incapable of normal human relationships. Mercedes stole my ability to love people fully. No racing victory is worth that. After Lewis finished testifying, Isabella was called to the witness stand. She had been granted immunity in exchange for her cooperation with prosecutors. Ms. Romano Martinez, the prosecutor said, please explain your role in the conspiracy against Mr. Hamilton. Isabella looked at Lewis before answering. I spent 3 years planning Lewis's downfall because I was angry that he had left me. I thought he had chosen racing over love by his own free will. When I learned he was genetically programmed to make that choice, I realized we were both victims. Isabella explained how she had discovered the truth about Mercedes's experiments and how that discovery had changed her motivation from revenge to justice. What made you decide to help expose Mercedes instead of destroying Mr. Hamilton? The prosecutor asked. Isabella looked at the families of the rescued children. I realized that my personal pain was less important than protecting innocent children from having their lives controlled by corporate genetic experiments. The trial continued for 6 weeks. Marcus Weber, Isabella's father, testified about the full scope of Mercedes' genetic program. He admitted to experimenting on hundreds of people and explained how the company had influenced sports competitions. For 30 years, other Mercedes executives were less cooperative, but the evidence was overwhelming. Elena's files, combined with Isabella's insider knowledge and Lewis's testimony, painted a complete picture of decades of illegal human experimentation. On the day of the verdict, Lewis sat with Isabella and Elena in the courthouse gallery. The judge read the guilty verdicts for all 15 Mercedes executives on trial. Marcus Weber received a 12-year prison sentence. Other executives received sentences ranging from 5 to 20 years. The court finds that Mercedes engaged in systematic human experimentation without proper consent, the judge announced. The defendants violated international law, medical ethics, and basic human rights. After the trial, Lewis, Isabella, and Elena walked outside the courthouse together. Reporters surrounded them with questions about their plans for the future. Mr. Hamilton, will you return to Formula One? One journalist asked. Lewis thought carefully before answering. Formula One needs to completely restructure itself. The sport has to decide whether it wants to be about natural human achievement or genetic enhancement. Until that happens, I can't participate. Another reporter asked Isabella, do you regret exposing your father's company? Isabella looked sad but determined. I regret that my father made choices that hurt so many people. But I don't regret helping to stop Mercedes from experimenting on more children. Elena was asked about her role in exposing the conspiracy. What will you do now that Mercedes's genetic program has been shut down? I'm working with international organizations to help other enhanced athletes understand what was done to them, Elena replied. Many people still don't know they were genetically modified. Over the following months, the sports world went through massive changes. Formula One implemented new medical testing to identify enhanced drivers. Many racing careers ended when genetic modifications were discovered. New rules were created to ensure fair competition between natural and enhanced athletes. Lewis found himself at the center of these changes. Sports organizations asked him to help develop new policies about genetic enhancement. Medical researchers wanted to study the long-term effects of childhood modifications. But most importantly, Lewis was learning how to build real relationships for the first time in his life. 6 months after the trial, Lewis and Isabella met for dinner at a small restaurant in Monaco. They had been spending time together regularly, slowly building a friendship based on honesty instead of genetic programming or revenge. "How are you feeling about everything?" Isabella asked as they shared a quiet meal. Lewis thought about the question. "It's strange. I miss racing, but I don't miss the lies. I'm sad about losing my career, but I'm happy about saving those children." Isabella smiled. "You sound more human than you used to." Lewis laughed. "Maybe fighting against my genetic programming is making me more myself." Isabella looked serious. "Lewis, I need to tell you something. I've been offered a job running a new foundation that helps enhanced athletes understand their medical history." Lewis felt proud of Isabella. "That sounds perfect for you. You understand both the scientific side and the emotional impact." Isabella hesitated. "The job is in London. I'd have to move away from Monaco." Lewis felt something he had never experienced before, the fear of losing someone he cared about. "How do you feel about that?" "I want to take the job," Isabella said, "but I also don't want to lose what we're building together." Lewis reached across the table and took Isabella's hand. "Then we'll figure out how to make it work. Maybe I can move to London too." Isabella looked surprised. "You'd give up living in Monaco for me?" Lewis smiled. "I've spent my whole life putting racing and career first. Maybe it's time to put relationships first." Isabella squeezed Lewis's hand. "Are you sure? Moving to a new place, building a life with someone. That's very different from the genetic programming that made you prioritize individual achievement." Lewis looked into Isabella's eyes. "I'm sure. For the first time in my life, I want to choose love over victory." 1 year later, Lewis and Isabella were living together in a small apartment in London. Lewis was working as a consultant for the new International Athletic Ethics Committee, helping to develop policies about genetic enhancement in sports. Isabella was running her foundation, which had helped over 200 enhanced athletes understand their medical histories. Elena had become a close friend to both of them. She was working on a book about Mercedes's genetic experiments and the athletes who had been affected. Lewis still missed racing, but he had found something more satisfying, helping other people who had been enhanced without their knowledge. He spoke at conferences, testified at hearings, and counseled young athletes who were struggling with the truth about their abilities. On a quiet Sunday morning, Lewis and Isabella were having breakfast and reading news about the latest developments. In Formula One, the sport was slowly rebuilding itself with new rules about genetic enhancement and medical transparency. "Do you ever regret exposing Mercedes?" Isabella asked. Lewis thought about the question while drinking his coffee. "No. Those 20 children are growing up with the choice to be themselves instead of corporate experiments. That's worth more than any championship," Isabella smiled. "Even if it cost you everything you thought you wanted?" Lewis looked at Isabella, sitting across from him in their small kitchen, working on plans to help more enhanced athletes. "It didn't cost me everything. It gave me something I never had before, the chance to be genuinely human." Isabella reached across the table and took Lewis's hand. "I love you, Lewis Hamilton. Not the genetically enhanced racing driver, but the real person who chose to protect children instead of protecting himself." Lewis felt his heart fill with an emotion he had never experienced during his racing career: complete contentment. "I love you too, Isabella, and for the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I want to be." Outside their London apartment, the world was still dealing with the aftermath of the Mercedes scandal. Sports organizations were creating new rules. Enhanced athletes were learning the truth about themselves. Families were healing from years of deception. But inside their small kitchen, Lewis Hamilton and Isabella Romano Martinez had found something that genetic enhancement could never create. Real love between two people who chose each other freely. Lewis had spent his entire life believing that victory was the most important thing in the world. Now he understood that some things were more important than winning. Truth was more important than trophies. Love was more important than legacy. And choosing to protect others was more important than protecting yourself. The greatest victory of Lewis Hamilton's life wasn't won on a racing track. It was won in a Swiss courtroom where he chose justice over silence, and in a London apartment where he chose love over everything else. Mercedes had tried to create the perfect racing driver by enhancing Lewis's genetics and programming his emotions, but they had failed to understand the most important thing about human beings. That true strength comes not from artificial modifications, but from the choice to do what's right, even when it costs you everything. Lewis Hamilton's greatest betrayal had come from his own team, but his greatest triumph came from choosing to be more human than the people who had tried to control him. And in the end, that was the only victory that really mattered. We'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let us know your city or country. It's amazing to connect with viewers from all around the world who share our love for compelling stories. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps us know what kind of content you enjoy most. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for many more interesting and thought-provoking stories like this one. Most importantly, please share this video with your friends and family. Stories like Lewis's remind us about the power of choosing. Truth over convenience, love over ambition, and protecting others over protecting ourselves. By sharing these messages, you're helping to spread kindness and awareness in our world. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Until next time, remember, sometimes the greatest victories happen not when we win, but when we choose to do what's right. See you in the next story.